Math Gad.
Oh, Math Gad guys, welcome to today's video in which we're going to be learning about the triangle congruence theorems. We're going to be learning the definition of what are triangle congruence theorems, what are they used for. We're going to see some examples as well. We're going to be taking a look at the theory that the triangle congruence theorems show us in order to draw conclusions. So let's begin. Okay guys, so the first thing we're going to be doing today is that we're actually going to be taking a look at each and every one of the theorems. The first theorem is the Sas theorem, or the Sas theorem as I would like to call it, because it gives us that whenever we have two triangles, right, and they give us that the side, the consecutive angle and the consecutive side to that angle are congruent to another triangle, then that we can say that both triangles are congruent, as you can see here. Make sure you pause the video if you need to copy this. Otherwise, we're gonna continue. Now, the very next one we have is the SSS theorem. The SSS theorem basically tells us that whenever we have two triangles with the three sides being congruent, we can actually say that the two triangles are also congruent, right? So in this case, we have that KL and P is congruent, KJ, MN, and we have that JL and MP is congruent. So we can say that the two triangles are congruent by the SSS. Now, what about the next one? The next one would be the ASA theorem, which basically says that whenever we're given the angle, the consecutive side, and then the consecutive angle again of two triangles, like in this case, we can actually say that because we're given that the angle, side angle, angle, side angle relationship between the two triangles are congruent, we can also say that the two triangles are going to be congruent as well. Okay? Now we're going to have the AAS theorem, which basically tells us something very similar. When we have an angle, we have then the consecutive angle and the next side to that second angle, right? So in this case, we have U being congruent to X. We have B congruent to Y. And then we have BW congruent to YZ. We can also draw the same conclusion that the triangles UVW and the triangle SYC are going to be congruent. Now it's very, very important that you remember how you name these theorems. And we have another one which is very, very special because it applies for right triangles. So whenever we have a right triangle, we're going to see the hypotenuse leg theorem, which basically tells us that if we have two right triangles, and we're given that the length of the hypotenuse, right, or h, is congruent to one another, and we're given that one of these two sides is also congruent, we can for sure conclude that the two triangles are going to be congruent. Now, let's use all this knowledge we have gathered in these 5 theorems in order to solve some problems. First problem we see here, we're told that one side, this side right here, is congruent to this side. This angle is congruent to this angle, and that this other side is congruent to the other side, right? Now, why are these two, first of all, are these two triangles congruent? Why not? And by which theorem? So if we name this APQ and we name this SBT, we know that APSB are congruent, AQSD are congruent, and then measurement of angle A and angles S are congruent. We're given one side, one angle, and the very next side. So we know that this is the side angle side theorem. And we can conclude that the triangle APQ is congruent to triangle SBT. Of course, depending on how you name it. But the important thing is that this and this, then P, then B, and then Q, in the same exact order. Okay, now let's take a look at another one. Now in this case, we are given 9 feet, the length of one side. We're given 9 feet as the length of the other side. We're given 40 degrees, 87, and 87. Okay, Now, in this case, we have side angle angle, right? So this is the angle side theorem, right? So we have two consecutive angles and the very next side being congruent to the same thing on the other triangle. Now, in this problem, however, we have x plus 4 feet and we have 7 feet. After we know that these two triangles are congruent, so for example, A, B, C, D, E, F, we can conclude by the Aas theorem that the triangle ABC is congruent to the triangle DEF. After we know that, we also know, because they are congruent, that AC is congruent to DF. So that means that x plus 4 is equal to 7 feet, which means that x is equal to 7 minus 4, meaning that x has a value of 3 if they ask us, right? So the first thing we do is that we use the theorem to make sure that they are congruent, and after we know that they are congruent, we just use equations to find the value of x. Now let's take a look at the very next one. Okay, so in this case we have two triangles. So we have, let's call it A, B, C, D. So we know that AB and CD are congruent, and we know that AC and BD are congruent, right? But we just have two sides, and we need at least 3 to use the Sas theorem. But we know that CB is a side that both triangles have in common. So it is congruent with itself, meaning by the Sas theorem that the triangle CAB, right, and the triangle BDC are congruent. Now let's take a look at the very next one. In this case, again, we have an angle, a side, and an angle. Congruent to an angle, a side, and an angle. We have the angle, side, angle theorem, right? Now, last but not least, we have two right triangles. And in these two right triangles, we're given the hypotenuse, we're given the leg. Right, so because the two legs and the two hypotenuse are congruent, and because we have a right triangle, we know that this is the HL theorem. So that means that because of the HL theorem, or the hypotenuse leg theorem, these two are also going to be congruent. And that is pretty much it for today, guys. Now make sure you memorize and remember all these triangle congruence theorems that we have that help us verify if two triangles are congruent. And that's pretty much it for today, guys. So without further ado, I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye bye.
Check out these other videos to improve your math skills, and make sure you click that subscribe button to make the community grow. Follow ohmathgad in its social media accounts, drop a like, a comment below, and see you on the next one. Bye!